What up, Cucks? It's your boy, The Hater, and I'm back. Now, it's been a busy few weeks, and I've had a guest over, which was sleeping in The Hater's guest room, thereby taking up my space where I typically make my videos. It's difficult for your boy to get his work done when there's people around, but now that that's gone and done, we can move on to hopefully a video a day. Now, it's going to be more than a video a day because I have to make up for the last several weeks where I didn't make any videos. Hater Mania is still running wild on all y'alls. Today's video is about MJF and LA Knight, but specifically, it's about the state of wrestling main events. Now, you turn on Raw, you turn on AEW, and you just see a bunch of jobbers. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Hater, didn't you say that LA Knight rules? Yes, I did, and LA Knight does rule. However, LA Knight is not a championship level guy yet, right? Let's be real. The reactions are dying down. His promo skills are not on the level that everyone says they are, right? He stumbles his words. He says cringy things, and it's just not that entertaining anymore. I mean, it was cool when he started getting over, but now it just feels a little bit forced, right? Like, he's having matches on SmackDown against Grayson Waller, who, as I predicted, as usual, I'm right, is nothing more than a jobber, right? He's having matches with Grayson Waller and beating him after making some cringy, insults, like some cringy promo that, quite honestly, didn't impress me at all. Then he beats Grayson Waller, and I'm supposed to believe that he's a threat to Roman Reigns. It's like the same thing is happening on AEW with MJF. Now, MJF is worse, obviously. Nobody would argue that MJF is as good or certainly not better than LA Knight. But the problem is still the same thing, right? It's like I was looking at the card for Full Gear, right? I mean, in there, we have a match that involves Edge, Christian, and Sting. So obviously, that match needs the main event. However, that match also involves Luchasaurus, Darby Allin, and Nick Wayne. Nick Wayne, to me, is like, I don't even know why this guy's in the company. He's like, I put him on the same category as Danny Garcia, right? It's just a bunch of just generic jobbers that are never going to make it in wrestling, right? There are a few good things happening in wrestling, it goes without saying, but the main event scene is not one of them. As evidence, I would suspect that the main event, I guess should be Jay White versus MJF for the world title. Now, this is like indicative of the horrible reign that MJF has had. Like, if there was one problem that AEW has, it's the meaninglessness of all the title reigns. You know what I mean? Let's be real, right? Kenny Omega's epic title reign was just a complete flop. And here's how I know. After someone loses the title in modern wrestling, there's this expectation that they just go away from TV, right? When did that become the norm, right? When did that become the norm? All of a sudden, Kenny Omega is like, oh, I want one more match, like a year later. You know what I mean? Why wasn't Kenny Omega consistently in the main event, right? That's how you make main eventers. You have to have someone that's consistently in the main event. And MJF is not that guy. And, of course, LA Knight is also not that guy. Like, if LA Knight, let's just say LA Knight becomes the world champion, right? Once he does that, eventually he'll drop the title to like someone better, like a Randy Orton. Let's just say, right? Let's just, for the sake of argument, we'll say Randy Orton or perhaps Roman Reigns again. I don't know, right? Then what is LA Knight going to do? He's going to go back to a Solo Sikoa level career, right? He's going to go feud with Grayson Waller, Solo Sikoa, Santos Escobar, and these other jobbers, right? We need real main eventers. And the most important thing is consistency. Same thing with MJF, right? Before you know it, he's losing to Wardlow. Then he is world champion all of a sudden. When the title reign ends, it's going to be him versus Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara again, right? Mid-card mania. That's the problem with wrestling today. Back in the day, in the Attitude Era, I'll give you a great example. We had Kane, right? People would be shocked to find out that for the majority of his career when he was relevant, Kane was only a one-time, one-day champion, right? Or was it more than a day? I think it was one day. I think he won it at the pay-per-view, then he lost it the next day. I could be wrong. Right? But Kane was a one-time champion. But despite this, Kane was a consistent main eventer. Right? He was like a Randy Orton. Right? He wasn't John Cena. He was like a Randy Orton, but without the title runs. You know what I mean? So at any given pay-per-view, during Kane's entire prime, Kane would be involved in something special. Right? It might be Kane versus Shane McMahon. It might be Kane versus X-Pac in like a legitimate upper mid-card feud, right? As one of the main attractions of WrestleMania, right? Definitely like one of the better matches at WrestleMania. Now, they had to throw in Rikishi and stuff there, but the point stands, right? The idea is that Kane was consistently a threat to become champion. Kane was consistently seen as someone that could beat anybody, right? So if you had Kane versus The Rock, right? The Rock may be champion, but it's not inconceivable that when the championship match is Stone Cold versus Triple H, that Kane will beat The Rock. It's actually quite likely, right? The Undertaker is very similar as well, right? He didn't have any title runs in what I would consider to be his prime, which was the Attitude Era, right? Until afterwards when he turned heel and betrayed JR, you know what I mean? He didn't have any meaningful title reigns, right? Actually, you might even argue that his prime is like after the streak became a thing when he beat Randy Orton, but it's neither here nor there. The point is, Taker was never this guy that needed the title, but he was a clear main eventer. Nowadays, we don't have any of those, right? Like, even Roman Reigns, if he loses the title and his next program is not for the title, which I just find hard to believe, right? Who is he going to wrestle? Who is another guy that could conceivably beat Roman Reigns that is not a main eventer, right? He's going to go back to feuding with people like Lashley, Drew McIntyre, Baron Corbin, these people that are basically jobbers in the making, right? They're not on the same level because they're not real main eventers. A real main eventer like Drew McIntyre would never lose to Walter. You know what I mean? To Gunther, rather. He would never lose to Sheamus, right? Drew McIntyre, main event at WrestleMania. He should be in a Kane position, right? It should be him versus Lashley until you find someone better. I don't know what to tell you. Figure it out. But in AEW, as usual, the situation is much worse, right? Now we have Kenny Omega is teaming with Jericho inexplicably, right? I know it's part of a storyline, and it's actually not a bad storyline, but it's still inexplicable, right? It's just another excuse to put them there together. Hopefully he's going to lose, and Jericho can start teaming with a Big Show or something like that, right? But the facts are what the facts are. Full Gear, I'm not looking forward to it at all, other than the Edge match, but that's not enough to make me buy a pay-per-view. I'll tell you that. But the main event, in a card where you have Edge, Christian, and Sting, right? Let's assume the main event is the world title match. The world title match is MJF and Jay White, which is absurd, right? That's an absurd main event. That's like an NXT opening match level match, right? These guys do not have what it takes. The truth is that it's very possible that the Edge and Christian match goes on last, right? And that further highlights the problem that I'm highlighting myself, right? That shows that there are no main eventers, that there is such a dearth of main event level talent that Edge and Christian have to be the main eventers, and the world title is so meaningless that it doesn't even finish the pay-per-view. So either way, it's a lose-lose, right? Now, the truth is that AEW is, in my opinion, like I've been saying this for a while, and I think I've been right the whole time, but they're on their last legs, right? It's pretty much over. At this point, all the people that go to AEW, like even the AEW fans are turning on AEW, you know what I mean? Like Tony Khan, I think he's doing his best. I don't know what people expected. I really think they expected him to be like a Dana White / Vince McMahon of AEW. He obviously wasn't going to be. You know what I mean? He's a nerd. He doesn't know what he's doing, right? He doesn't get it fundamentally. There are people in the roster that deserve pushes, right? And you can see this from the several people that have been let go by Tony Khan that, in my opinion, are going to do very well in WWE. Most of these I've been able to predict very well, namely Jade Cargill, who is the best wrestler in the world in terms of female wrestlers, and Brian Pillman Jr., who is now doing great work, in my opinion. I mean, all things obviously relative. He's not Braun Breaker, but he's doing great work as Lexis King in NXT, right? I said from the beginning, this guy, even Griff Garrison, they didn't take Griff yet, but these guys are much more talented. They have a much better ceiling, if you will, than someone like Orange Cassidy, right? But for some reason, Orange Cassidy is like a multiple-time champion. Like, he's the mid-card champion, right? And he's wrestling like John Moxley, who's back in the mid-card, I guess, right? Like, for some reason, he's a multiple-time, in basically Intercontinental, International champion, they call it, but the mid-card champion. It's a multiple-time mid-card champion, while Brian Pillman is a jobber, right? Who loses to, like, Private Party, who are never going to make it, right? You had, I should say, interesting things in AEW, but just like in WWE oftentimes, they don't pull the trigger correctly and they focus on the wrong people, right? The same thing could be said, let's say, about Del Rio, right? Who, even though he was a multiple-time champion, right? He and many others were overshadowed, right? Including like The Miz, including R-Truth, when they were like, at the moment where you could have made them legitimate main eventers, they were overshadowed by someone lesser than them. In WWE's case, CM Punk, and of course, in AEW's case, basically every champion they've ever had has been a jobber, right? So the truth is, AEW would benefit Same thing with WWE, but AEW, at least WWE has Roman Reigns. AEW would benefit from taking an AEW guy, right? A legitimate bad dude, like a Powerhouse Hobbs or Wardlow even, you can salvage him still, and making him the world champion, right? Invariably, right? There were times when TNA, in my opinion, had a better world champion. Not in my opinion, obviously. When TNA had better champions than Raw and SmackDown, right? There were periods of time when it was like, I don't know, let's say Rey Mysterio was the champion on SmackDown, and I don't know, Triple H maybe, or whatever, or John Cena, a young John Cena, was the champion on Raw. And in TNA, the champion was like Kurt Angle, right? So, you know, it's very obvious that Kurt Angle is better in terms of like, you know, as a wrestler and honestly as a character than Cena and Triple H. Definitely than young Cena and, you know, down your throat Triple H, right? So there were times, and AEW should try to capture that same magic. They should try to focus their talents, not necessarily on a WWE guy like AEW did, but focus their talents on one of their homegrown guys so that if the champion, once Roman Reigns loses the title, right? And as soon as they have like 2 jobber champions, they already got one in Seth Rollins, right? But if LA Knight wins, right? Let's say he becomes the champion, or I don't know, let's say anybody else becomes the champion. I don't know. Let's say Tozawa becomes the champion for the sake of argument, right? If the champions are Tozawa and Seth Rollins, or I don't know, Seth Rollins and Walter, right? But AEW has, I don't know, Edge as the champion, right? You can make the argument, at least, it won't be a very good argument, but it's an argument that AEW has the #1 wrestler in the world. Right? Now you can't make that argument because in AEW it's MJF. And he's obviously worse than Roman Reigns, right? Roman Reigns is like, he eats in a different table. You know what I mean? He's not at the kids' table like everybody else. But the point still stands, right? This idea that anyone can be champion and anyone is legitimized by the championship is flawed, right? And the fact that everyone in a wrestling company is supposed to be this person that is in some capacity capable of being a main eventer is ridiculous, right? We have people like Grayson Waller who should never be main eventers, right? He should never be in a main event match ever. You understand me? Never. Not even on a throwaway episode of SmackDown, right? You have people like Santos Escobar who have been taking a paycheck from his company while producing nothing in return, right? And this guy is out there feuding with Rey Mysterio now. Are you kidding me? Rey Mysterio has a few years left in his career probably. He should be in the main event. You know, there are people that have the mystique of main eventers. It's just that for some reason, they aren't being used. And in my opinion, MJF and LA Knight really prove this. Right? They really prove this idea that both WWE and AEW are fundamentally out of touch. With LA Knight, you can make it happen. You could make it happen if you didn't have him job out in Saudi Arabia, right? LA Knight should have gotten this slow burn push, right? Where he starts with the US title or whatever. He can beat Logan Paul. That's perfect, right? It's perfect for LA Knight to beat Logan Paul, right? That's what he said he was going to do. He's going to become the US champion. No, Logan Paul did it before him, right? Can you believe it? Logan Paul is like one of the best wrestlers in the world right now, right? Because the level of competition is so low and so mismanaged that people like Logan Paul actually stand out because they're athletic and charismatic and have things going for them, right? Meanwhile, LA Knight gets a push, but what does it lead to, right? It leads to him losing, and now he's going to start the quest again. It doesn't matter if the next rung on the ladder is Grayson Waller, right? He should be out there attacking Roman Reigns. And the next time Roman Reigns is, like, how come no one attacks Roman Reigns, right? You know how back in the day, the good guy would occasionally do a run-in and hit the bad guy with a chair? Why does no one do it to Roman Reigns? Roman Reigns is basically immune from any kind of negativity, right? Once in a while, he'll be in like some meaningless tag match where his partner is Solo Sikoa and Jey Uso pins him. Ooh, great. And then what happens to that? Main event Jey Uso becomes mid-card Jey Uso and goes teams with mid-card Cody Rhodes. Right? There are no main eventers, but there are people that have the capacity to be main eventers. Even someone, I can't believe I'm saying it, even someone like Baron Corbin, right, is a better option than 99% of the roster. Because Baron Corbin at least has a look to him. He's believable. He looks like a badass, right? Stop with these idiot gimmicks. Oh, he's a rich man. He's a poor man. Burn the ships. He should just be Baron Corbin. That's it. Baron Corbin is out there to beat people up. That's the way you book Baron Corbin. You don't need, I don't like the gimmicks that have been dealt. That's stupid, right? That's stupid. Just ignore that for a while he was Happy Corbin. Just ignore it. They do it all the time. They ignore things all the time. Just ignore that and just introduce him as Baron Corbin and have him go beat people in NXT in 5 seconds like he used to. Then transfer that to the main roster, and have him beat people like Grayson Waller in 5 seconds. Right? Why is LA Knight, who's supposed to be the next big thing, struggling to beat Grayson Waller, who should be in NXT? I rest my case, cucks.